All right, here we go. This is Food and Shelter. And today...
And I'm Chris.
Oh, and I'm Caleb. Forgot to mention that. And today we're going to talk about why exterior insulation is important for your home. So let's define our terms.
All right, first of all,
what is shelter?
So shelter is fundamentally protection from the elements.
Right.
And what that means is keeping wind and water out and regulating light and temperature.
Right. Yeah, because that's fundamentally what a structure is for. Since the beginning of structures, right? Is that
exactly.
They've been trying to keep you out of the rain and the wind and maybe keep you warm. So, and the sun too, I guess. So out of those things, though, that we just mentioned, those elements, water is the big one. And why is that?
Well, basically, water is what damages buildings the most. That's really what destroys. The greatest destroyer of buildings is water.
Right. Makes sense. And where does water come from?
So, obviously, rain is the first thing we think of.
Yeah.
But that's not the only place water comes from.
It comes from the ground, too, right?
And especially basements, like people
Sure.
have underwater, hydrostatic pressure going up from
Sure.
the bottom of their basements. That's something people are aware of.
And that's why weather barriers and waterproofings have become so popular now in building.
Exactly.
They weren't always, like in the 80s, they didn't even worry about this stuff, and they built houses out of wood, and a bunch of houses fell down because they rotted out from water. But nowadays...
And presently, frankly, in construction, unfortunately, because of poor quality workmanship,
sure,
same thing.
It still happens sometimes. But by and large, most people know that they should have a weather barrier, some sort of waterproofing on their building. And that keeps out rain and groundwater, at least it's supposed to, if it's done well. But where else can water come from?
So the third place the water can come from, ironically, is from the inside of the house.
Yeah. And not, well, from the inside and outside.
And the outside, but through water vapor.
Right. In the air. The water can actually come from the air.
And this is something cool that I learned, without going into too much detail, but I read a article in Architectural Digest, as a matter of fact, I believe, like 30 years ago, that really explained perfectly how the higher water temperature is, the more water the air contains.
Yeah.
In the same volume of air.
Right.
So 100% humidity at 80 degrees is like a heck of a lot more water than 100% humidity at 40 degrees.
Right. So this is something a lot of people don't think about all the time. I know I don't think of this all the time, except in the context of building. But air actually holds water. And you can't see it, but it holds water molecules in it. And the hotter the air, the more water it can hold. And the colder the air, the less water it can hold.
Exactly. And that's what the dew is on the outside. Yeah.
And this is what causes condensation. So it's like if you have a glass of ice water on a hot day, it gets all wet on the outside. And that water's not coming from the inside of the glass, it's coming from the actual air.
Right. Because the air temperature on the outside of the glass lowers, and then the water condensates from the outside air onto the glass.
Right.
Exactly.
So, what does water condensation? Everyone knows water condensation, but what does that have to do with people's houses?
So the reason that's crucial in the design and construction of the house is because that water flow,
the vapor
flow, exactly, I'm calling it water, but you're right. It's not water. It's not liquid. It's water vapor. That ends up condensing at a certain point in the wall. And that point is based on the design of the wall and on where the insulation is specifically.
Right. And that's basically because the air in modern homes, the temperature and the humidity inside the house is being regulated at a constant temperature all the time.
Not just temperature.
And humidity as well.
And humidity.
Right. But on the outside, the temperature and humidity is fluctuating all the time.
Exactly.
And so that is going, just like that glass that's, the glass of ice water condensating, that's going to cause condensation somewhere.
Right.
And so that point of condensation is going to be, just like it's on the outside of the glass, it's going to be somewhere inside of the wall.
Exactly. And what that location is called in the wall construction of your exterior wall is called the dew point.
Right. And
that's the point at which the water will condense into liquid water.
Into liquid, exactly.
Right.
And so, of course, because of that, it's so important to try and make sure that that point where the water is condensing into liquid water, which can damage your house, that point of condensation is outside of your weather barrier.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, you're just getting your wood or whatever your house is built out of wet.
Otherwise, that weather barrier is keeping that water in.
Yeah, that's right.
Literally.
Yeah. So, okay. So how do you do that? If you have a house and it's built out of wood, how do you get the dew point of your house to be outside of the weather barrier?
Well, that, as you mentioned, that point fluctuates. That dew point will fluctuate depending on how the air temperature and humidity fluctuates on the outside. Because as we discussed, your interior temperature and humidity should be pretty much regulated and constant.
Right.
If you have the humidifier going in the winter time, when you have to add this water vapor to your heater because you're heating colder air that can't hold as much water, so you have to add water in the form of vapor to humidify that air to raise the temperature.
And the same in the summertime, we have dehumidifiers on our air conditioning.
Exactly.
Right.
Because first, if you don't take the water out of the air before you cool it, it'll literally rain. Like it'll condense
inside your house.
And you don't want that.
Right, of course.
Yeah. But say, for instance, you have a day where it's 72 degrees out and it's the same humidity outside as it is in. Right. Well, then you don't have a dew point. Right. Like there's literally no dew point because there's no change there, so that there's no humidity flowing through the wall.
Right.
But it's when there's a change,
a difference between the inside and the outside,
exactly,
and humidity and temperature.
And that's what we refer to as that homeostasis, which is what the vapor tries to attain. It wants
equilibrium.
Exactly.
It wants to be the same everywhere.
Yeah. So the pressure is going to be wherever that higher humidity air is, it's going to push in that direction. So usually in the summertime, the water vapor from the more humid air outside will be pressing inside into the wall, which is okay. You just don't want the liquid coming in.
Right.
But then
in the
conversely,
winter, it's the opposite.
Exactly.
Right. Makes sense. So how do you that dew point is then falling somewhere inside of your wall? What can you do to push that dew point outside?
Well, one option is, the usual thing is to have what's called bat insulation in framed homes,
right?
Which a huge portion of our homes now are framed. Like almost all of the homes are framed.
Right.
It's got to be like 95, if not more, percent of the homes built are framed homes. So that bat insulation is the insulation in between the framing members, the studs. And then if you just have siding, for instance, on the outside of there, then your dew point is going to be somewhere in that insulation cavity. Whereas if you sorry.
Well, no, because of course the insulation is what is helping you regulate the temperature inside your house.
Exactly.
And if that is only between the wood studs, then the temperature is only being regulated all the way on the inside of the wood studs, and it's being not regulated at all on the outside of the wood studs.
Right.
So that means that dew point is going to fall somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. And so one more thing that might help explain this. If you had little thermometers throughout the wall, throughout the cavity of the wall,
right,
you would see different temperatures. If it's 0 degrees outside Fahrenheit, or,
right,
then, and 72 on the inside, then all throughout that wall cavity, you would have a change of temperature.
Right.
Up until the outside of that wall cavity is going to be 0 degrees.
Right.
So that will help explain why that dew point changes.
Sure.
Because so wherever that dew point is, so if you add insulation, say with EIFS, on the outside of the house,
right,
then that literally changes the location of the dew point.
Yeah, right. It pushes the dew point out.
Further outside the wall.
Right.
And the key is if your dew point is not outside of your water barrier, then your water barrier is not helping for this source of water.
Right. So it sounds like insulation is the most important factor in terms of where the dew point falls in the wall.
Exactly.
And the key is to push that dew point out as far as possible to get it on the outside of your weather barrier.
Yes.
And so it sounds like a really effective way to do that is to put exterior insulation that's actually on the outside of the wood, not just between the wood studs, so that you can push that dew point to the outside of the wall and protect your house from liquid water.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, I like that.